Welcome to the Pink Sphere podcast. This is your 30 minutes of pink, a weekly space to pause, breathe, and tune into something real. Each episode, one of our incredible coaches join us for a conversation that matters. This time, we're going somewhere that makes a lot of us squirm, speaking up. Not just finding the words, but saying them without spiraling, shutting down, or blowing up. Today, we've got Helen Goldwyn with us. Hi, Helen. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Nadine. I'm very well, yeah.
I'm so happy you're here, and I want to just jump right in and ask you this question. What are some early signs that a conversation is going sideways?
Well, it's interesting because this is dependent on personality type. We have so many different communication styles within, human behavior. And I work around a quadrants model, which talks about the four main types of communication style. Obviously, we can be combinations of these types and we can have lots of different elements to them. But as a model for starting to understand how different people function, it's really, really helpful. So if you're dealing with someone who's quite assertive and extrovert and confident, then the signs that the conversation is going sideways will be raised voice, probably language that might be a bit more profane. You might be hearing swear words. You might be hearing definitive statements about what you do and how you affect that person. So it'll be quite strident and assertive. But then you've got the opposite end of the spectrum. Somebody might become very introverted and quiet and not participate with the conversation. And that in its own way is passive aggressive. That's someone who can't find the words because the emotion shuts them down. Then you've got the other type, which is the more sort of attention-seeking personality type, who might become very sarcastic. So they might be laughing and smiling and going, oh, yeah, that sounds great. I really agree with what you're saying. And that is its own type of aggression. And then you've got the person who's very emotive and people-focused and wants to be liked. And as soon as they feel they're not being liked, they might get upset. They'll be tearful or holding back tears or struggling to speak. And mostly that is very genuine. But those tactics can also be used in a controlling way. So someone might be crying, might use tears or distress to try and control. So, there are lots of different ways in which we can recognize that this conversation isn't going the way we want, but most of them contain emotion.
Yeah, I mostly end up crying in a stressful conversation. I have a lot to say, but I just stop and start crying.
Yes.
And it makes me even more uncomfortable in that situation, in that conversation.
Well, often we cry when we're angry. So
Yeah.
it's a contradictory emotion. It's like, I want to tell you how angry I am, but my distress is kind of swamping the anger. And that's because we have a fight or flight response. That's
Yes.
the amygdala, the part of the brain that sort of takes over and stops the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational kind of reasoning part. It sort of suppresses the activity of that prefrontal cortex. And I like to call it an amygdala hijack. It's like as soon as we lose our temper, we're out of control.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
it's very hard once we've let that control go.
Yeah. And what's your tip about, when things start to get heated and you start to notice that and you feel like you can't handle it? What's the very first thing someone should not do, to handle that
Well,
situation?
in my work, I use the words react and respond in quite specific ways. So it's natural human instinct that amygdala kicks in. Somebody's being aggressive or accusatory, and it's our instinct to react. Excuse me. React means sort of reenact what we're seeing. So we're mirroring the behavior that we're on the receiving end of. So if somebody's shouting at us, we're going to raise our voice. If somebody's swearing at us, it opens the door for us to use inappropriate language, disrespectful language. And there's a quote by a psychologist called Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor in the 1940s. He went on to become a very renowned psychologist and neurologist. And his survival tactics and strategies that he designed in the concentration camps, he went on to sort of use those in real life. And the quote that I love from him, and it's a very famous quote, he said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom." So, of
Wow.
course, it's very difficult. If somebody's coming at you,
Yeah.
accusing you of stuff or saying that they're unhappy, of course, we're going to be defensive. But if we can stop, take a breath, think, I'm not going to react. How do I choose to respond? And of course, a lot of the work that I do is about helping people to understand the options of how to respond and how
Yeah.
to understand why the other person is communicating in that way.
Yeah.
So when we choose to respond, we stay adult. We're not becoming a child or a parent. We're not being parental and judgmental, and we're not being sulky and like a teenager. We're going to stay neutral and in the middle in an adult space. We're going to keep our voices at a calm conversational volume. We're not going to use swear words. And we're going to use some strategies for giving feedback and for gaining more information. We're going to ask open questions, and we're going to give feedback in a positive developmental way. And
Yeah.
that's how we move forward and resolve these things. If you have an argument, there's never a resolution. You
Yeah.
never solve it.
It is. It is. And you need to start with trying to understand that person, because in order to get to his or her level, you need to know where she or he is coming from, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What lays under that behavior.
Yeah.
And
And often we don't ask. We make
yeah,
assumptions and judgments. We
yeah,
say, "Oh, well, you're saying that because A, B, and C." But really, one of our first steps should be, if somebody was coming at me with an argument or, an accusation, I would say, "Okay, I'm really shocked to hear that. I would really like to find a solution, a resolution to this. Tell me more about why you're feeling that way."
yeah. And this happens. I'm sorry. This happens in all of our homes, right? With our in
Oh,
our
yeah.
marriages, with our kids even. They
Yeah.
start to react, and without us understanding them, trying to understand them, we keep replying back, showing
Yeah.
reactions to them, and their conversation style changes according to
Yeah.
the answers we give them, right?
Yes, exactly. And often behavior doesn't reflect the true feelings. Often, particularly in teenagers or
Mm-hmm.
younger kids, aggression or defensiveness comes from a place of fear and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of doesn't necessarily become clear to us
Mm-hmm.
from the way they're communicating with it. Well, you're being unpleasant, therefore you must be angry with me or you must hate me. But often what it means is they're pushing the boundaries to see how safe you are. I saw a
Yeah.
brilliant analogy once of somebody was sitting in a fairground ride, and they said, "What's the first thing you do when you sit in the fairground ride? You pull the safety bar across, and then you check it. You check to see that it's not going to give way." And that's
Yeah.
what kids do with their parents. They
Mm-hmm.
push and push and push. How much do you really love me?
Yeah.
I'm going to push you so far because I'm actually really insecure and scared. I want to
Yeah.
see that you're my safety bar no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to understand that unless you ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think it's possible to still stay kind, but be firm when setting boundaries, especially in your relationships and with your kids? Do you think it's
I do
possible?
think it's possible. I think it
Mm-hmm.
takes practice. I think it takes awareness of a self awareness of how you communicate, what your natural style is. Because let's say, for example, you're a very assertive person and you're dealing with someone who is much more introverted and less confident. Your assertiveness, and you would define it as assertiveness, might come across as very intimidating to that person.
Mm-hmm.
That's not your intention,
Yeah.
but once you have an awareness that other people move through the world with a different map to you,
Mm-hmm.
we're all in the same territory, but we've all got our own way of moving through that territory, and it's not the same as yours. And so we have to adapt, really kind of perceive people in a clearer way, and build a bridge so that we meet them halfway in terms of communication style. So if I were an assertive manager, for example, and I had a very emotional team member, my natural style would be to say, look, you're not doing the work quite as efficiently as we need. We need these deadlines met. You're not meeting those. And the other person would go away and feel very upset.
Yeah.
Whereas if I have an understanding that they need encouragement, they need
Mm-hmm.
emotion, they need acknowledgement of the things they're doing well, then I would adapt and say, listen, you're already doing a great job on this part of the work, and it'd be great to get this part of the work to match that, because we really value you and we really
Mm-hmm.
want, to get the best out of you. That's a
Yeah.
completely different way of making someone feel.
Yeah. We almost always forget to appreciate what that person in front of us does for us, right? But when
Yeah.
it comes to, finding reasons to, what is it called? Find excuses for things that he's not doing. We're good at that. We're good at that part.
Yeah.
But
Well, how do you feel if somebody said to you, I'd like to give you some feedback? How would you feel?
yeah, anxious, of course, anxious.
Of course,
And
because
you keep, yeah,
we associate feedback with criticism,
yeah, with
whereas
negativity.
feedback, should be developmental.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to give feedback to someone, it's not with a view to saying you're doing that really badly. What's the point of saying that? We should be
Yeah.
saying, I know you've got the skills to do this really well.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need is for you to increase your skills so that you can match that with this piece of work. I believe in you. I know you can do it. What do you need from me to help
Mm-hmm.
you get to that stage?
Yeah,
That's
motivate.
feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not about negativity all the time. We need motivation, we need positivity in our lives, and the appreciation. It
Yeah.
really makes your day. It changes the way that the
Yeah.
rest of the day goes, and it's really important, but mostly avoided in a
We
conversation.
forget. But
Yeah.
I mean, I do a lot of leadership training, and the
Mm-hmm.
fundamental difference between being a leader and a manager, obviously, a manager gets the tasks done. The manager is in charge of process, and of course, they have to manage people. But leadership is not about that. Leadership is encouraging, motivating, and inspiring. And that means
Yeah.
recognizing when someone is competent, giving them autonomy, recognizing when someone needs additional support, giving them encouragement, recognizing when someone needs to work it out for themselves and making sure they have the environment to do that in. It's just tailoring an approach for the individual,
Mm-hmm.
and also having clear vision yourself and being able to articulate that and getting people excited about what they're
Yeah.
doing and where they're heading.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you are a drama-led consultant at the Pink Sphere, and you also work on how to say no, right?
Yes.
Yes. So
No.
so could you please tell me about that? How you started doing that, and why do you think it matters to learn how to say no?
I started doing some work many years ago, helping nurses and administrators and sort of people in those sort of job levels to deal with quite domineering personalities in senior positions in the NHS.
Mm-hmm.
And we would do simulated conversations where I would play the very kind of overbearing personality, and we would run a typical conversation, and then these nurses would end up still saying yes to doing additional work, to staying late, to, going over and above, even though it was affecting every aspect of their lives and their health. And so we'd have to rerun that conversation, and I'd give them feedback and say, you just need to say no. And so then we would run it, and they'd say, no, I can't stay late because I've got a date with a friend of mine. Of course, then that consultant or whoever the senior person is would say, oh, well, you're the only person that can do it, and I'm sure you can make a different date on another night. So the technique is, one of the techniques is the stuck record, where we keep on saying no. in a polite, respectful way where we say, I'm really sorry, I'm not able to do that. And so these nurses would find it very difficult to do that, but we'd practice it until they finally got the words out. Because what people want to do is give a reason why. And as soon as you give a reason why, a domineering or controlling or manipulative person will use that reason to talk you out of it. So minimize the information. I'm really sorry, I'm not able to do that. Oh, why not? I'm just not able to. I'm sorry. Well, give me a good reason why not. I'm really sorry, but I'm not able to on this occasion. So you just find different ways of saying I'm not able to without giving any reason, because you're not under any obligation to give anyone any information about your life.
Yeah. Yeah,
Especially
exactly.
not when they're trying to coerce additional work out of you.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we learn to say no, particularly in a society nowadays, for young people in particular, because there is this rise of awareness in coercive, controlling behavior in relationships, sometimes in friendships, but more often in relationships. And it's learning to set the boundaries straight away, to be able to say, no, I don't agree with that. Why not? I just don't agree with it and I'm not going to do it. And so for people who are not very confident, it takes practice to learn how to say that and feel comfortable with saying it. And it's really crucial that young men and young women are able to articulate in that way, and not have to give reasons. Like somebody saying, oh, why don't you come home with me? We've had a lovely evening. Why don't you come home with me? I'm really sorry, I'm not going to do that. Why not? Come on, we're getting on really well. Yeah, I really like you and I've had a great evening, but I'm going to go home now.
But
So it just need to
sorry.
practice.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard to say no? Do you think it's coming from what we've learned from our families? Because I think they are the ones that say no less, right? For example, when I ask my mom to look after my kids, she says yes. But I know in truth, she is so tired. She is not
Oh,
feeling well, right? So perhaps is it because we learned from them, or what else could it be?
I think there are a lot of sort of social expectations on women in particular still, even though we've
Yeah.
made so many advancements. I'm kind of a different generation to you. I'm sort of 20 years on, and I'm still, even though I'm emancipated and I'm very assertive, I still have those deeply ingrained values as a woman that I need to be the primary carer for my children. I'm the one that does all the family administration. I'm the one that looks into schools and organizes all of the exam revision and does the school uniform. And my husband is amazing and does as much as he can, with as much as I'll allow him to, but I have
Yeah.
still taken on the bulk of that responsibility because I think it's my job, even though I work full time
Yeah.
as well. So I think we're still indoctrinated by social expectations that is our job. And I think we are also indoctrinated into thinking that we really ought to help other people, even if it's to our own detriment. And so I'm very much an advocate for women in particular to be able to say, that doesn't work for me. I'm really sorry, but that's not happening.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's such an empowering life skill. And I would love
It is.
everyone to have an opportunity to learn it.
It is. And do you think with saying no also comes the confidence to be able to say no, right?
Mm,
You need to be confident to say no. You need to be confident to speak up when things get heated in a conversation. And one
yeah.
other thing you do at the Pink Sphere is also helping ladies with their first dates, right?
Yes.
And that what the most important part of a date is confidence as well. What do
Yeah.
you bring to the table with, you know talking around the topic of confidence with the workshops you do about dating and speaking up and everything?
I think it's really important to have mantra in your life, to really prepare before you go into a situation and remind yourself of how amazing you are. Because I think we forget in the heat of the moment and in the desire to make a connection with someone, we go into it sometimes thinking, I hope they like me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you had a list of affirmations and things that you've already achieved and overcome in your life, and you reminded yourself of that before you went in, you would then stop being a buyer. You would be, you'd stop being a seller. I'm selling myself. You would become the buyer. You want to go into that scenario saying, I'm amazing. Look at all these things I've done. This person is really lucky to be spending an evening with me. And
Yeah.
that is a mindset, and that takes practice as well, that we look in the mirror and instead of thinking, oh, I could lose a few pounds, we say, wow, I've got fantastic eyes and I really love my style and I look great. We need to practice that before we even go into a date. So that's a big part of the sort of foundation work that we would do. And then being on a date, I think, again, almost following on from what we were talking about conforming to expectation, we as women tend to conform to kind of being a great date and being compliant and being vivacious. And actually, I think we need to go in and think, I'm going to be me. And if you don't get on with me, then you're not the right person for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to waste another date on you.
Yeah.
We're constantly trying to shape ourselves into what the other person wants. No, we're buying. Are they what I want? And I really want
Yeah.
to empower women to look at it like that.
Yeah, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why relationships don't work, because at first we act like that person that will be liked, right?
Yes,
And then starts to show up as who we really are, and then
exactly. And then
yeah,
they think, oh,
problems.
you're not who I thought you were.
Yeah, yeah,
Where,
exactly.
or they might think, oh, wow, I wish you'd shown this side from the outset because I think you're great.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think authenticity and having the confidence and the self-love to go in as yourself is the starting point. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that goes into feeling that way before you even go into the date.
There are lots of people who are afraid of just speaking up or speaking in general,
Mm.
let alone saying no. So, what's your one top tip for making sure someone hears you?
Um, well, on a very fundamental basis, I
Hmm.
mean, so much of the work I do is about behavior. And when I say the word behavior, I talk about what you display to the world, what you say, what you do, and how you say and do it. So
Hmm.
I could say to you, oh, it's great to see you. I'm really enjoying this podcast. And my voice, my facial expression, and my body language does not convey any of those emotions.
Hmm.
Um, if I sit up straight, for starters, if I use my voice fully breathing from my diaphragm, which is again something we can work on, is vocal technique and breath, how the breath supports the voice and makes it richer.
Hmm.
That will then convey more confidence. And if I make sure that my face reflects my emotion, it's great to see you. I'm really looking forward to this podcast. And already the impression is different. And we can use those techniques of facial expression,
Hmm.
vocal power, and body language, even though we feel really scared inside.
Hmm.
So I think a big part of my philosophy is that the outside in approach can work just as well as the inside out approach, in that I don't believe in acting. You don't have to be an actor.
Yeah.
You don't have to mask. You don't have to pretend. But we all, at some point in our lives, will stand up straight and use a strong voice. Maybe it's in the privacy of your house with your family, and maybe outside of that, you're much more nervous. But at some point in your life, you will have said, "This is how I speak, and this is how I sound." And it's bringing that into other situations, saying, I know you can speak with confidence. I know you can speak loudly and stand up straight.
Hmm.
Um, and even though you're scared, and even though you feel perhaps diminished by the other person, you can still use those behaviors. And then they will respond to you in a different way, and that will make you feel different. So that's what I mean by an outside in approach. If we go into it feeling nervous and looking nervous, the world will respond to us in that way, and we'll carry on feeling that way. I do believe that you can feel lacking in confidence, but still behave in a confident
Okay.
way.
Yeah.
And then the world will see you in a particular way and respond accordingly. And that will start to affect how you feel.
Feel
And that in turn will start to affect how you think about yourself.
Hmm.
Because the world will behave in a different way towards you if you use these confident behaviors, the outside.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does, really. And I want to ask you one last thing. So, if I were a client who found you through the Pink Sphere and
Yeah.
booked a session, how would we start? What would we do in a session with you?
Probably one of the first sessions would be to understand the different communication styles using this quadrants model that I work with, because I think it's really important for an individual to understand why they do what they do, how they communicate, and why they communicate that way. And often that comes from understanding what one of these four driving forces. Because once you understand that that's what drives you, that's your innate personality type, there's often a light bulb moment where people go, oh, that's why I behave like that and I do things like that. And that's why I struggle to connect with someone who's on the opposite end of that quadrants model. You know, once you can see the differences between the different communication styles, it opens up a whole world of possibility, because then you think,
Yes.
okay, I don't connect with that person because they like their communication style in a completely different way to me. So I can adapt and give them a little bit of what they need, and then I can have more influence. It's very
Yeah,
empowering.
it is.
And I
It is.
experienced it myself when I started doing this work. I had an acting agent who was very monosyllabic. I used to phone her up and she'd say yes, and I'd say, "Oh, it's Helen Goldwyn. How are you? Fine." And I was very scared and intimidated. And then I learned about these different personality types, and I realized she's the opposite end of the spectrum to me. She's task focused, she's controlling, she's trying to make money. I'm just a cog in the machine. She doesn't
Yeah.
want me to waste her time. So then I got rid of all the pleasantries. I used to phone her up and say, "Hi, it's Helen. Can you get me an audition for this?"
Yeah.
And she transformed. She behaved in a completely different way towards
Wow.
me.
Wow. You changed and she changed.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
how it works. Yeah.
it does. It does. And do you have this one last, I don't know, tip or motivational quote or anything for the ladies watching us, watching this episode?
I think, as I've said, I believe in reminding ourselves of all that we are and all that we've achieved. And that can feel very uncomfortable. I remember when I first encountered affirmations, and I had to read them aloud to myself in the mirror, and it feels so awkward and uncomfortable. I love myself. I am everything I should be. I'm perfect as I am with all my mistakes. But actually, kids should be doing that from day one. We should be telling people to look at the amazing things that they are, and to make that the foundation stone of their personality.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, kind of connected to this notion of feedback. If we're trying to tell people that we want change in the way that the dynamic is working, we need to think of positive language to ask for that. Because what we all tend to fall into is this default setting of negativity, where we say,
Yes.
I don't like it when you do that, and I don't want that. So before you start, think about, what do you want? And what do you like? Because if you can give that positive outcome, it's much more of an appealing conversation. So if I went into a conversation with my husband and said, I would like us to share the cleaning responsibilities a bit more. And I think that would make it feel much more fair. And I think that would get rid of a lot of tension around, what happens at the weekends. I think it'd be really good to aim towards that. It's quite hard to argue with that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yes, I would say, whatever you don't want and you don't like, think of what it is that you're wanting to work towards. What does that look and sound like? And that's the way to start these conversations.
Wow. Amazing, Helen. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been
My
a
pleasure.
pleasure to be here
Me
with you
too.
today. And that's it for this week's 30 Minutes of Pink. If Helen's words gave you something to think about or reminded you that it is okay to take up space with your voice, go find her on thepinksphere.com. And if this episode helped you, share it with someone who always says I'm fine when they are clearly not, or someone who's learning to speak up for themselves. We all need a little reminder that we can set boundaries without burning bridges. Follow the show and stay tuned. Next week, we got another coach, another topic, and another conversation that just might change the way you see yourself. Bye.